the other thing is the actual structure of the federal government. And I want to go through this. Uh, we have three different branches of the government, dividing up the powers of government into the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. So let's think in big terms. The legislative is to create laws. The judicial, or I should say it the other way. Let's do it the other way. Legislative is to create laws. The executive is to enforce the laws that are created by the legislative, and the judicial is the branch that decides what the law actually is. Okay. Now, in the Constitution itself, the purpose of the judicial branch was left in many ways undefined, and so the first few years of the Republic, there's going to be a question about whether the Supreme Court and the judicial branch of the federal government can define law for the states. But we will learn in our next lecture that that eventually it became tradition, I guess you could say, that the Supreme Court then becomes the final say on what is constitutional and what is not. Okay, so if the Supreme Court says it, that's it. There's no more argument about it. Okay, questions, comments? All right, so let's keep going. Let's talk about the executive is the president, and he's in control of much of the government. For example, the Justice Department, the Defense Department, the Commerce Department, all the different departments of the federal government. The president is charged with enforcing the laws under the Constitution. He's elected by the Electoral College. Now, you guys may or may not have gotten a lot out of the last election in terms of the Electoral College. They were fighting about the electors from the states in Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Arizona. You guys remember that? And why were they fighting about that? Was it because the vote was close? No, it was not close. I mean, Biden got 7 million more votes than Trump, so that's not close. Okay, but it was a little bit closer in the Electoral College, because the way that the president is elected is not by the popular vote, but by the Electoral College. And how is the Electoral College chosen? The Electoral College is chosen by, in each state, by the number of representatives plus the number of senators. So, for example, I'm not sure if it's 54, 55. California has 55 or 54 electoral votes, which accounts for all of its representatives and its 2 senators, right? And in other states like Wyoming have 3 votes because they have 1 congressman and 2 senators, right? You guys get what I'm saying? And so in a presidential election, what happens is that each candidate puts forward a slate of electors, which is a number of people in the state who will vote for that candidate, right? So if we looked at the last election, Donald Trump had a slate of electors, and Joe Biden had a slate of electors. And then the way that it works in most states is that whoever wins the popular vote in a state gets all of the electors, right? So, for example, I think in California, Biden got 60% of the vote and Trump got 40% of the vote, something like that. But when it came to the Electoral College, Biden got all the electors and Trump got none. He didn't get 40%. You guys get what I'm saying? Okay, so it's called the winner-take-all system. And almost there's only 2 states that don't go by the winner-take-all system. So what that does is it makes it possible for somebody who loses the popular vote to gain the presidency. That's what we saw happen in 2016 when Donald Trump lost the election in the popular vote by 3 million votes, but he won in the Electoral College, because in the Electoral College, you need to have more than half, right? You need to have a majority, okay? You guys are with me? Not a plurality. You know the difference between a majority and a plurality? Anybody? Nobody? Come on, this isn't just government, this is math. A majority is more than half. A plurality is the most, right? So for example, if there were 3 candidates and each of them got a third of the vote, then, or actually one got a fourth of the vote and the other 2 got, anyway, I can't figure it out. I'm not a math major, but the point here is that whoever got the most votes, even if it was less than half, if they had a plurality, they might be elected. But in our system, you have to have over half of the electoral votes, right? You guys get what I'm saying? So this is why a lot of people say, well, the Electoral College is unfair, because it makes there's many problems with it, but one of them is that it means that the majority of the people in the United States could vote for one candidate, and the other candidate can still win the election. And that's happened in a number of cases. It happened with Trump. It happened with Bush the first time, the Bush 43, and then it happened like 2 or 3 other times before that. You guys are with me? Questions, comments? So at any rate, when you go to vote, which you must go to vote, right? When you go to vote for the president and you push the little tab in that says Joe Biden or Donald Trump, you're not really voting for Joe Biden or Donald Trump. You're voting for an elector for Joe Biden or Donald Trump. So now why is the Electoral College there? The answer to that is because the writers of the Constitution, well, there's really 2 reasons, but the first reason is because the writers of the Constitution didn't trust the people. Okay, so the attitude when we see the Constitution being written, the attitude is that the founders were afraid of too much power in the central government, but they were also afraid of too much power in the people. Okay, they were afraid of too much power in the central government because of their experience with Parliament, but they were also afraid of too much power in the people because of the mobs that had occurred that really led to the calling of the Constitutional Convention. You follow me here? So they were reluctant to grant too much power to the people. And the purpose of the Electoral College, then, one purpose of it was to put a buffer between the presidency and the people that would keep the people from electing a charlatan, right? The idea was that that let's say that everybody in the country is fed up with national politics, and everybody decides to vote for Goofy, Goofy the cartoon character, right? And so all the electors for Goofy meet in Sacramento, let's say, and they'll say, well, wait a minute, we can't really elect a cartoon character, so they'll pick somebody else, right? You follow me here? And what that does then is it overrules the people. And that was one of the things that, if we look in 2016, we were looking at the Democrats trying to change electors' votes in favor of Hillary Clinton. And in 2020, we saw the Republicans trying to change electoral votes in favor of Donald Trump, right? Because the idea is all you need to do is get those electoral votes. It doesn't really matter what the people say. You follow me here? Okay, so that's the reason for it. The reason for it is that there's a check on the power of the people over the executive. Okay, that's one reason. The other reason is that the president originally was intended to be elected by the states and not necessarily by the people. One of the interesting things about the Constitution is it leaves up to the states how to choose the electors. So in the first election, most of the electors were chosen by the state legislatures. People didn't vote. Okay. Um, and it was only later that the states then enact laws that say, okay, this is how we're going to elect our electors. Okay, but it's left up to the states by the Constitution. You guys are with me? Questions, comments about all this? All right, okay. So that's the executive branch. The president's elected to a 4-year term, and he can be reelected. And according to the Constitution, he could be reelected for life. As it happens, George Washington will set a precedent of being of leaving office after 2 terms, and that precedent will stand until the 1930s when Franklin Roosevelt will be elected 4 times, and then after that, the Constitution is amended to limit the president to 2 consecutive terms. All right, questions, comments? All right, let's move on then to the judicial. Again, the judicial creates laws. The way that the judicial is made up is that there's 2 houses. That's why they call it bicameral, a 2-house legislature. Why are there 2 houses? Well, if you will recall, or maybe you don't recall, maybe you read it in your book, but there was a big argument at the convention about how the legislature was going to be chosen. And some people said, well, the legislature should be made up of that each state has equal representation. But others said, no, it should be based on population, because if you decide that each state has equal representation, then what that really ends up meaning is that small states have more power over the government than big states, right? Because if you have, say, for example, Delaware has the same number of representatives as Virginia, that means the people of Virginia individually have much less power than the people of Delaware. You guys follow what I'm saying? Okay, so that's the problem with that. But then on the other hand, if you go only by population, then that means then that the people in Delaware will be overwhelmed by the people in Virginia because there's like 10 times more people there. You follow what I'm saying? And so what they end up with then is a compromise that essentially does both, right? We have the House that is elected directly by the people, and the number of representatives is based on the population of the state, and the population in the United States is counted every 10 years to make sure that the House is the representation in the House is reflective of the population of the country. All right, and that's why we had the census last year, and now there's going to be redistricting. So it could be that maybe California will lose an elector. I think that it's possible that California will lose a representative, and that other states will gain that representative to make sure that the people are all represented equally. You guys are with me? Questions, comments about that? And then the Senate, originally, senators were not elected. They were appointed by the state government, either by the legislature or by the governor. What they do is they represent, essentially they are representative of the small states. Or we could just say that the Senate represents the states, right? So we could say the Senate represents the states and the House represents the people. Okay, does that make sense to you guys? Okay, all right. So the senators are elected to 6-year terms, and they can be reelected. The Senate, as I mentioned, wasn't elected until the 17th Amendment, which was in sometime early in the 20th century. Okay, before that, senators were always appointed by the states. The House representatives in the House can serve 2-year terms, and they can be reelected. So as it was in the beginning, so is it now. that the Senate and the House, senators and representatives can essentially run forever. As long as they can keep winning their elections, they can stay in Congress forever. And that could be one of the reasons why we have so many senators in the Senate now who are in their late 80s and early 90s. Right? Okay. Questions, comments about any of that? Okay. And then finally, we come to the judiciary. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning, it was really kind of unclear what the judicial was supposed to do. But in the end, it turns out that the judicial is the final decider of whether laws are in conformance with the Constitution. So to be appointed to the judiciary, as we've probably already noticed, they're appointed all federal judges, not just the Supreme Court, but all federal judges are appointed by the president, and they're confirmed by the Senate. And once they're in, they can serve for life. Sometimes they retire, sometimes they die in office. We saw Ruth Bader Ginsburg die in office. We saw Antonin Scalia die in office. And then we see others like John Paul Stevens who retired, right? You guys get what I'm saying? Or John Kennedy, not John Kennedy, Anthony Kennedy, right? Questions, comments about this? All right, okay. So at any rate, the judicial ends up being a very important branch, although not it's not as spectacular, I guess, in terms of visuals as the executive or the legislative, because executive and legislative are working every day to enact policies or to retract policies. But the judicial is much quieter, but its power is much more significant, because once the judiciary says something is true, there's only two ways that can change that, is that they can either change their mind, which they won't hardly ever do. They do sometimes, right? Or the Constitution can be amended. That's the only two ways to override the judicial branch. You guys follow me here? Questions, comments? Are any comments or questions about the structure of the federal government? Let me ask you this. How much of the federal government originally was chosen by the people?
Legislative and executive?
No, the executive is chosen by the Electoral College. The Electoral College is chosen by the state. Okay.
It'd be only the House, wouldn't it?
That's exactly right. It's only the House. So only 1/2 of 1/3 of the government is chosen by the people. Now, why do you think that is? I thought we were supposed to be a democracy. Think about what I said about the Electoral College.
So they didn't trust us to make the certain decisions?
Exactly. The founders were afraid of the people. They were afraid of them, and they were afraid that if they put too much power in the hands of the people, the government would not be able to survive. And so they insulated it. And their idea was that only certain people should have input into the government. And generally speaking, those people would be property owners. Okay. And the reason for that was because there was a sense, so from Locke, we could see that only property owners needed protection from his ideas, right? But then going beyond that, the idea that if you own part of something, then you'll be more responsible for it. So if you own part of the country, you'll see the interests of the country will be your interests. Whereas if you don't own anything, then the country's interests could come secondary to your own interests. You follow what I'm saying here? So it was deliberately set up so that there was hardly any input from the people, and even these people that could vote, it was very restricted who it could be. All right, questions, comments? Okay, next, does this look like a government that's going to be very efficient? Because if you want the federal government to do something, right, then you have to introduce a law. It has to go through committees, and then eventually will have to be approved by one branch, and then it goes to the other branch, and they go through the same process again. And then if it's approved by the second branch, it's got to go back to the first branch to make sure that that they approve of all the changes that were made in the second branch. And then after all that, it has to go to the president, and the president can either sign it or not sign it, right? But if the president signs it and it comes into law, it can be challenged in the courts, right? And so it could take months or years before a law actually becomes is enacted. Does that seem like it's very efficient? Does this seem like a government that can really get things done? What do you guys think?
Not at all.
No. So now, do you think that was a mistake, or do you think that was deliberate?
It was intentional
It was intentional. And why was it intentional?
because they didn't want. They came from an oppressive government or form of rule. Really, it was a form of rule, and
Right.
they didn't want that to happen again.
Yeah, the Parliament's government was efficient. The King's government was efficient. The king said, send a fleet to New York and bomb them. And they did it, right? It wasn't like a lot of hemming and hawing about it. And that's the thing that the founders, as I mentioned to you, they were afraid of the people, but they were also afraid of the central government. And so they essentially limited the power of both. I mean, think about it. Hitler had a efficient government. If Hitler said do it, it was done, right? Same thing with Saddam Hussein, right? Okay, we don't have an effective government. I mean, it can and does get things done, right? But it does it slowly and deliberately, not by the whim of one man, theoretically, right? You guys follow what I'm saying? And that's exactly what they wanted. So a lot of people, you hear a lot of people complain about gridlock in Washington and nothing gets done. If you were to bring back one of the founders like George Washington or Ben Franklin and complain and say, look, they can't get anything done in Washington, they would have said, great, that's exactly what we wanted. We didn't want them to be able to get things done, right? Because it's essentially the idea that too much government is too much government. Almost all of the founders believed that the best government was the least government,